Lori here. I'm here today to do my April reading wrap up. Now, I read a lot in April. Like, I read a ridiculous amount of books in April. So, if this video gets over 30 minutes, I'm probably going to split it into two parts. And this is April 24th. So, I still have like half a week left. So, I definitely will read more. I did have a week off this week from school, and then I did have testing at the start of the month. And I read a lot of shorter books. Just because I said this in a couple of other videos, a lot of the girls that I'm working with on my show really like contemporary reads, so I've been reading them just so I can give them to them when I'm done reading them. Um, but I had a really, really good reading month. I read at the filming of this, I have read with audiobooks, I have read 11 books. And that is not including the two books I finished the day before April. So I'm going to talk about those first, and then I'm going to go into the reads. But yeah, I actually had a really good reading month, and I thought that this was a much better reading month than March, which I definitely failed at. I just didn't have, but I felt like a really, really big sense of accomplishment. So the two books that I finished the last day of March, the first book that I finished was When Summer Ends by Jessica Pennington. I was chosen to be on a blog tour for this, and I actually did fan cast it. So if you go back in my blog post, you can see it. I think I casted, if I'm remembering correctly, I think I casted Maya Mitchell and Ross Lynch. But it basically follows these two characters. It's a perfect summer beach read. I like flew through this read. I read it in like a day and a half. But it basically follows Aiden and I cannot remember her name. It's been a while, but it follows Aiden and this other girl that I just can't think of her name. But they wind up working together at this beachfront like place. And Aiden is someone that is dealing with like he's a he wants to go pro for baseball, but he's slowly losing his eyesight. But he really has a deep love of art, and the girl is just dealing with a lot of life changes. But I really enjoyed this book. I gave it like 4.5 stars, and I thought that it dealt with like disability representation in like a really interesting way. And I haven't read a disability like that on the page before, so I was really liked it. Thought the romance was really, really cute, and I just really enjoyed it. I love Jessica Pennington as a writer. Her first book dealt with music, this book dealt with art. And it's so funny that I'm like putting up a production of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, but like 90% of the books that I've read this month have to do with art or like music or dance or something. So I've just really been gravitating towards those reads. But I really wound up enjoying this book. I love Life in the List. This book was an equal favorite, and I cannot wait to see what she writes next. The next book was definitely my most disappointing read so far, probably of the year. I just really was not a big fan of this, and that's The Chocolate Chip Pie Murder by Joanne Fuqua. Sorry, in the previous clip, I made two title errors. Love Song and Other Lies was Jessica Pennington's first book, and this is The Chocolate Cream Pie Murder by Joanne Fuqua. And I have a really big love-hate relationship with this book series because I love the world building. I love what Joanne Fuqua does because it literally feels like you're in like a small, like tiny town. But the mysteries just get weaker and weaker as the series goes on. So this book, like the world building was like a 3, the mystery was like a 2. And I've said this before. If you have the word murder in your title, the murder should occur in the first 20% of this book. This murder did not happen until 70% into this book, and it just really bothered me. I felt like this book and the books recently have really not been focusing on the side characters, and that's the elements of these books that I tend to really like enjoy and I tend to really like. Because this cast of characters is so big and you just become so invested in them. But then like when you get there, it's the cast of characters is just not as compelling as it used to be. And I felt like the end with Ross. I've never liked Ross as a main character, like as in being in a relationship with Hannah. So maybe this whole storyline just kind of played out. I'm curious to see what happens in the next book because there's a big twist that happened at the end. But yeah, just not my favorite. I definitely gave this book like 2 stars, and that's a really low rating for me. Now let's get into the books that I finished reading in April. So the first week of school that we had in April was testing week. Um, School wise, this month was a little bit challenging because I was trying to put up block my whole show. There was testing one week, we were off one week, and 2 weeks they were just crazy, which happens because I think that they were all ready for spring break, which I get. Um, so the first week we had testing, but I did get a lot of reading done that week just because I literally was the bathroom monitor. So the first book that I finished reading in the month of April was Night Music by Jenna Marie Thorne. And I did actually wind up meeting her that day before, so I did get the book signed. I just gave it to one of my students. But here is a pretty picture of the cover. Really like this book. I wound up giving this book like 4.5 stars. I thought it was like a really realistic depiction of like arts high schools and arts colleges. I just thought it was really well done. I love the main character, Ruby. I thought that she's again is a very different type of heroine that we don't often see. And I found it to be super compelling. I really loved the race dynamics that was in this relationship between Oscar and her. And I just liked how they almost use his race as like a calling. Like I thought it was really interesting, the race dynamics. There was like hints of elements of mystery in it. There was like a flashback friendship that I really liked. I just was super captivated by this novel. And it didn't take the normal trajectory of like that I normally see in these types of contemporaries with that deal with the arts. So I really like that, and I normally really prefer books that have a male to female point of view, like you get both sides of it. But I was actually okay with it. I felt like Oscar was a character that I've seen before and I could easily go inside his head. But not in like a bad way. I really wound up enjoying this book, and I will definitely be checking out more by this author in the future. She has a couple of books that I am currently adding to my TBR because I'm just really intrigued by them. So that's the first physical book that I finished in the month of April. The next book that I wound up finishing in the month of April was Waiting for Tom Hanks by Kerry Winfrey, and I will tell you my funny story about it after I show you guys a picture. The funny story about this book is I went into it thinking it was a YA contemporary, but it's definitely not. It's an adult romance. And I don't normally read these very often. The only adult books I read pretty regularly is the Joanne Fuca series, but it was okay. It kind of felt like I was reading a romantic comedy, which normally I like watching romantic comedies, but this book felt like it was just like pointing too much out like the elements of a romantic comedy, so it kept making me reminded of why this could be like a little bit ridiculous. But it basically follows this character, and she really really wants to live a life as a romantic comedy. Like that is her dream in life. And she's also a writer. She's writing a screenplay inspired by her best friend Lucy. Um so she winds up getting an opportunity to work as a PA on like a romantic comedy, and she winds up having a relationship or working with, or like having elements with the lead. And I normally love this trope in like YA books because like when the girl falls for the lead, like I love it. I've read it so many times and I really enjoy it. This book was okay. It didn't wow me at all. I just felt like and it took me a long time to read this book too. It took me like a good 4 days. So you could tell I just wasn't that invested in it, but I really wanted to finish it. And it doesn't come out, it comes out in not December, June. And there will be a sequel. So I liked it. I didn't love it. I gave it like 3 stars. If you're looking for kind of like a really quick beach read that if you read books like that, it will probably be a fast read for you, then I highly recommend it. For me, it wasn't my favorite, and I wound up giving it to a girl in my school, so. But I wound up giving it 3 stars, and it was like an okay read. Nothing wow, nothing awe-inspiring, but it was okay. The next book that I wound up reading was definitely one of my highlight reads of the month, and that is Field Notes on Love by Jennifer E. Smith. I have read quite a few Jennifer E. Smith books. I read The Statistical Probability of Love at First Sight. I read This Is What Happy Looks Like. I read The Geography of You and Me. I still have a couple that I haven't read, but this is one that I really like this book. And I was a little bit worried because I wasn't the biggest fan of the statistical probability of love at first sight. It just didn't wow me. This one I really liked, and it was a really short read. I read it in like a day. I've been doing that recently. I've been reading books really, really fast. I just because it's probably like the genres that I've been picking. But yeah, so basically follows these two characters, May and Hugo. And Hugo is a sextuplet in England, which is like the coolest backstory ever. I love sextuplets or like multiple births. They just fascinate me to no end. And you have May, and they're both kind of at a crossroads in their lives. It's the summer before they go off to college. Hugo is about to go back to, Hugo was dating someone named May, and she wound up planning this trip for them to go to the U.S. and go on an adventure. Everything's in her name, but when she breaks up with Hugo, she breaks up with Hugo and gives him these tickets because she still wants him to go, but everything's in her name. So she needs to find somebody that has the same name so that he could use these reservations. So enter May, who's an inspiring filmmaker who has had a very, very rough go at it recently. So she's going to college, but she's not been accepted into the film program for various reasons. So they wind up meeting and they wind up going on this cross-country adventure together, and it was just so good. I love the family dynamics in this book. I thought it was just so well done. It was so fast too. Like, it was such a quick read. I had a really hard time putting it down. I loved both characters. I think Hugo is just like my soulmate, my new cinnamon roll character. I may need to get this book for my shelf, or at least as an audiobook so I can continually listen to it, but this book was so good, and it dealt a lot with self-discovery and changing your own destiny, and it was just a really, really good read. I really, really enjoy it. I didn't spy the insta-love that I was afraid of that normally happens in these books, but I just was really, really impressed by it, and I will definitely, after I finish Casey West's canon, she's the next author that I want to read all her contemporaries, so keep a nose out for that in my future reading vlogs. The next book that I wound up reading was American Panda by Gloria Chow. This was a book that I liked, but I didn't love. I actually did like it because it focused on like a different culture, and I really am craving those reads because I think that our own experiences in life, like, we're very, very insular to those. So I like to read about different experiences. This follows a girl named May, another May, and she graduated a year early, so she's in college. Her parents really, really, really want her to be a doctor. She does not want to be a doctor, so she's kind of dealing with that. There is a subtle romance, but I didn't feel super connected to it. It was okay. I was a little bit more invested in her like self-discovery elements. She again is like, and I'll talk about this later in top 10 when I get there. Her character's head was a little bit hard to be in at points. She definitely deals with anxiety and issues like that. So being inside her head was a little bit painful sometimes, just because she's so focused on some stuff. But overall, I like the depiction of that. This book also did have an art twist because she was like very like interested in art and performance, and her parents did not support that. So yeah, I like the diversity that I got learning about a different culture. It just wasn't my favorite contemporary that I read. I wasn't super connected to the love interest, but I honestly don't think that that was the point of it. But I did like the parents' dynamics that I saw, and I did like the use of phone calls as like a transitional through scenes. Yeah, it was okay. It wasn't my favorite, but I definitely would read more by this author in the future because her writing style and the diversity she exposed me to was something that I really enjoyed. So overall, I gave this book 3.5 stars for a review. Wound up reading is the first book I still have is The Princess and the Fangirl by Ashley Poston. I did go to an event for this, and she did sign both my books, which is really exciting. So I know that there has been a lot of mixed reviews about this book on BookTube and various reviews that I've seen. I will definitely say it wasn't my favorite. I think I still prefer Geekerella. But I still did wind up giving it 5 stars. I was actually really connected to both sides of the story. This is basically a Prince and the Pauper retelling. It follows Jess, who is the lead of Starfield, which we met in the last book. And there are a lot of Geekerella crossovers, which I really liked. But it basically follows Jess and Imogen, and Imogen is determined to make sure that Jess's character, Princess Amara, does not die. And she does die at the end of the movie, so it's like basically like a fan casting. So they wind up swapping places in this book because Jess needs to find out who has been leaking the Starfield script, and Imogen wants to make sure that Amara does not die. So they have very, very conflicting agendas. Well, the one thing I did like about this book is it did deal with topics that weren't addressed in the first book because Darian was the lead. But it did look at like fan boy culture and fan girl culture and like what women deal with when they're involved in these movies. But it also did deal like what is the responsibility of a story? Like, that was something that I was really interested in. And I did like that it was a dual romance. I went in thinking that it was not going to be that way, but there was two very strong romances that I actually really wound up liking. I definitely liked one more than the other. I felt like one romance just got a little bit more screen time and made a little bit more sense. The romances weren't, I think because it was like two different characters, I think they got like a little bit shafted a little bit. So for that, I think the romances in this book was like maybe like a 3-star, but I really did like the world building. I love the setting. I love the geek. So maybe like a 4.5-star read. I really did like it. I think I definitely do prefer Geekerella a little bit more. But I really did like it. And we are getting a book 3, which is going to be Beauty and the Beast. I just love how Ashley Poston takes these books and makes me feel like I'm at a convention. I go to conventions a lot throughout the year. I go to book signings, and it's just really nice to see a book represent that lifestyle that I live. But yeah, I really liked it. It was just so much fandom love. That's why I give these books just make my heart like beat 1,000 times a minute. I just love. It reminds me so much of my friends and when we go to conventions together, and it's just so fun. Romance has not sparked at any of my conventions like this anyway, but I really did enjoy this book, and I'm really excited to read book 3 in this series soon. So, on reflection, I probably gave it like a 4.5 stars, but fandom alone, it's a 5-star read. So definitely go check it out. Just the romances weren't as prominent, but I think that was more so because there was 2 that she was balancing and not 1. I had been reading a lot of contemporaries, so I wound up taking a little bit of a break, and I wound up picking up The Train to Impossible Places by P.G. Bell. This was a formal Owl Crate Jr. pick, and I got it from Comic-Con last year. But I actually like this book. I didn't love it, and I think I went in with like a little bit higher expectations than I was liking. But it basically follows this girl named Susie, and this train winds up coming into her house one day, making an unexpected stop, and she winds up tagging along to see what this train does. And this is basically it's basically a train that goes to impossible places to deliver mail. Now that would be really, really cool in and of itself, and I wanted that to be a little bit more of the focus of the novel, like all these different places that they go to, all these different impossible places. There really wasn't the point of it. There was like a mystery and it was fun. There was like really, really cute illustrations. I liked it. I didn't love it. But I'm hopeful that book 2 will expand the world a little bit. It just wasn't what I was expecting as a read. I thought that it dealt with like underground issues a little bit interestingly as well. I like the trio of characters that developed, and I liked it. You have to kind of suspend your disbelief in these because they kind of like go out randomly without parents. But I did like it. So I wound up giving this book 3 stars for review. If you are just in the mood for a pure adventure story, I would check this out, or it would make a great read aloud for like littler kids. I liked it. I didn't love it. So again, 3-star read for me. The next book that I wound up reading was another early read for me, and it's Call It What You Want by Bridget Kimmerer. This comes out, I think, in June, so I read this really early, but definitely one of my highlight reads of the month. This is the 3rd book in her companion series. The first 2 were very, very closely linked, Letters for the Lost and More Than You Can Tell. This book did not connect back to those, so I'm curious to see if the next book will connect to this book. But I really, 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 really like this book. It follows 2 main characters. The gentleman in this, or the male character in this, his dad got indicted for insider trading, and there was a lot of issues, and he wound up trying to commit suicide, and it had very, very bad results that winded up with him not dying, but also like basically paralyzed and unable to speak and communicate, which is heartbreaking. And then the girl in this is dealing with a lot of stuff. Her sister came back from college pregnant and she can't tell anybody. And she also was caught cheating on the SATs last year. So they're both dealing with like really hard issues. This book was just an emotional gut punch. Again, I read it super fast. I read it in like a day, day and a half. It just was so compelling, very emotional, very much in the same vein of like a Katie McGarry read. It was very emotional. It focused a lot on male friendships, which I really liked. It focused a lot on class issues, and it was a really, really good read. The boy in this had like a deep love for reading, and he was reading like YA fantasy like Ember in the Ashes, which I thought was just such a fun little quirk. And I just really, really love these two characters so, so much. And I really can't wait to see who the next book's gonna be. I have a theory it might be Owen, but we will see. So I will have to report back when I find out who that book's about, or if there's even going to be a book. But that's the next book that I read, and it was definitely one of my highlight reads of the month. So I'm definitely going to cut this video in half because this video is at like 20 minutes. So I'm going to cut this video here, and hopefully my part 2 will be up like the next day. So just keep a nose on that. And in that final video, I'll wind up giving you guys all my stats. But yeah, so let me know in the comments what was your highlight read of the month and what was your lowest read of the month. Right now, I would say my highlight 2 reads would be More Than You Can Tell and Field Notes on Love. And my disappointing reads was the Chocolate Cream Pie Murder and American Panda. So those are my low points and my high points, and I hope you guys will check out my part 2 when it comes out in the upcoming week. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.